You really thought I'd spend the rest of my life broken and barren like you predicted, didn't you, James? The grand ballroom of the Rosewood estate was decorated in soft blues and whites, gender reveal perfection for the baby you were having with her. I watched your face drain of every ounce of color, watched your champagne flute slip from your fingers and shatter across that marble floor. As I walked through those double doors with my 4 children, not one baby, James, 4. My identical quadruplet daughters, dressed in matching lavender dresses, holding my hands and walking beside my husband. Dr. Adrian Chen, one of the most respected fertility specialists on the West Coast, the same man whose research you once called quackery when I begged you to let me see him. You know what they say about karma? She doesn't just come back, she comes back with compound interest and a fleet of designer strollers. My name is Dr. Lillian Chen now, though I was once Lily Morrison, the woman you told everyone was defective, the wife you divorced because I was supposedly unable to give you a family, the woman you invited to this baby shower specifically to rub my face in your happiness with your new wife, Christine. This is the story of how I went from a devastated, supposedly infertile woman contemplating ending it all in a bathtub to standing in your celebration with 4 miracle babies and the truth that would destroy everything you'd built on lies. If you've ever been told your body is broken, if you've ever been blamed for something that wasn't your fault, if you've ever been discarded by someone who promised to love you in sickness and in health, if you've ever watched someone rewrite history to make themselves the hero and you the villain, if you've ever been invited somewhere specifically so someone could humiliate you in front of everyone you once knew, then this story is for you. Because sometimes the universe has a plan so perfectly orchestrated, so beautifully timed, that it takes your breath away and restores your faith in cosmic justice. Hit that like button if you believe that the truth always finds a way to surface, no matter how deep someone tries to bury it. Subscribe because this story is going to show you that sometimes the person who throws you away is actually doing you the biggest favor of your life. They're just too blind to realize they're the one who's going to lose everything. Before we continue, let me tell you, every word of this story is true. The names have been changed, but the events, they happened exactly as I'm about to tell you. And by the end, you're going to understand why karma isn't just real, she's an artist. But let me start from the beginning. Back when I actually believed James Morrison was my forever. I met James Morrison at a medical conference in Chicago in 2015. I was 26, a newly minted pharmacist with dreams of opening my own consultation practice. He was 31, a corporate attorney with a corner office and a smile that could sell ice to penguins. We had one of those movie moment meet cutes. I'd accidentally grabbed his coffee order at the hotel Starbucks. Both of us had ordered an Americano with an extra shot. He'd laughed when I realized my mistake, told me to keep it, ordered another one, and then asked if he could join me for breakfast. Fate works in mysterious ways, he'd said, sliding into the booth across from me. Maybe the universe wanted us to meet over stolen coffee. He seemed like everything I'd been taught to want. Successful, confident, from a good family. He talked about his parents' 40-year marriage like it was the gold standard. He mentioned wanting children someday, when the time is right, with this wistful look in his eyes. 3 months later, he proposed on the rooftop of his apartment building, with downtown Chicago lit up behind him like a promise. I've never been more certain of anything, he said, slipping that ring on my finger. You're going to be the mother of my children, Lily. I can already see them. They'll have your eyes and your kindness. We got married 8 months after that, in a garden ceremony that his mother planned down to the last rosebud, 200 guests. An ice sculpture, a cake that cost more than my first car. This is just the beginning, James whispered during our first dance. We're going to build an empire together. Beautiful home, beautiful children, beautiful life. For the first year, it really did feel like a fairy tale. He'd leave notes in my lunch bag, send flowers to my work, plan surprise weekend getaways. We'd stay up late talking about baby names and where we'd send our kids to school. I want at least 3, he'd say, his hand on my stomach even though nothing was there yet. Maybe 4. I want a full house, chaos and noise and little feet running everywhere. Little things at first. Easy to dismiss. Easy to rationalize. We'd been trying to conceive for 6 months when James started making comments during dinner. Maybe you should skip dessert tonight, he'd say, sliding the plate away from me. Sugar affects fertility. You know, my mom said she was very careful about her diet when she was trying to get pregnant. When I suggested we both see a doctor for a routine checkup, just to make sure everything was working properly, he'd looked at me like I'd suggested something insane. Lily, we've only been trying for 6 months. Don't you think you're being a bit anxious? Stress is probably the issue. You need to relax. By month 9, the helpful suggestions had multiplied. Are you sure you should be drinking coffee? Even decaf has trace amounts of caffeine. Maybe you're exercising too much, or not enough. Have you researched the optimal exercise levels for conception? My cousin got pregnant the month she quit her job. Just saying, maybe the stress of work is affecting your hormones? Every question carried the same underlying assumption that I was doing something wrong, that my body was failing because I wasn't trying hard enough, wasn't careful enough, wasn't worthy enough. By the first year mark, the trying to conceive process had become a full-time project that James managed like a hostile takeover. He bought ovulation kits in bulk, made spreadsheets tracking my cycle, set alarms on his phone for my fertile window. Tonight's the night, he'd announce, like he was scheduling a business meeting. There was no romance anymore, no connection, just clinical precision and growing disappointment. When my period came each month, his face would fall, but worse than his disappointment was his analysis. Did you take your prenatal vitamin? Yes, James. Did you eat anything that might have affected your hormones? I don't think a salad affects. You don't think, Lily. That's the problem. You're not taking this seriously enough. He started coming with me to my gynecologist appointments, sitting in the exam room, asking questions like I wasn't even there. Could it be her weight, her diet, her exercise routine? What about stress? Could her job be the problem? My doctor, Dr. Patricia Hayes, would look at me with this careful expression. Mr. Morrison, fertility is complex. It's rarely about one single factor, and it's not about blame. I'm not blaming anyone, James would interrupt, but his eyes would slide to me. I just want to understand what we're dealing with. After 18 months, Dr. Hayes suggested we both do fertility testing. Both of us, James had said, his voice sharp. Why would I need testing? The Morrison men are famously fertile. My dad has 5 siblings. My grandfather had 7. This is obviously, he stopped himself, but we all knew what he'd been about to say. Obviously me. Stage 3, open cruelty. By year 2 of trying, James had stopped pretending to be supportive. We were at his parents' house for Sunday dinner when his sister-in-law announced her 3rd pregnancy. The table erupted in congratulations. His mother actually cried happy tears. 3 grandchildren, she'd said. Oh, Jennifer, you're so blessed, so fertile. The word hung in the air like an accusation. Everyone's eyes slid to me. James's brother, Todd, had clapped James on the shoulder. Your turn next, little brother. Though at this rate, we might lap you again before you even get started. The table had laughed. Not cruelly, exactly, but not kindly either. James had smiled tightly. Well, some things take longer than others. Not everyone can just make it happen on command. I'd felt my face burn. James, what? It's true. We've been trying for 2 years, Lily. 2 years. Most couples conceive within the first year. Clearly something's not working. His mother had reached across the table, patting my hand with this pitying expression. Honey, have you considered that maybe this is God's way of telling you something? Not every woman is meant to be a mother. Some women are meant for other purposes. I'd excused myself to the bathroom and cried silently into a towel for 15 minutes. When we got home that night, I tried to talk to him. James, what your mother said really hurt me. And the way you talked about our struggle in front of everyone. Our struggle? He'd laughed. This bitter, ugly sound. Lily, let's be honest. This is your struggle. I'm just along for the ride at this point. That's not fair. We don't even know if there's a problem, and if there is, it could be either of us. It's not me. His voice was flat, certain. I know it's not me. How can you possibly know that? He'd looked at me with something like contempt. Because I'm not the common denominator in my family's fertility issues, Lily. You are. That's when I should have left. That's when I should have seen what he really thought of me. But I was so desperate to prove I wasn't broken, so desperate to give him what he wanted, that I convinced myself if I just tried harder, if I just fixed whatever was wrong with me, everything would go back to the way it was. I made an appointment with a fertility specialist. Dr. Adrian Chen ran a comprehensive clinic across town that Dr. Hayes had recommended. When I told James, he'd barely looked up from his laptop. How much is that going to cost? Insurance covers most of it. Most of it. So we're throwing more money at your problem. Great, fine, whatever you need to do to fix this, Lily. Just fix it. 3 months later, Dr. Chen had the results of my complete fertility workup. Mrs. Morrison, he'd said gently, your ovarian reserve is excellent. Your hormone levels are normal. Your fallopian tubes are clear. There is absolutely nothing wrong with your fertility. I'd stared at him. But we've been trying for over 2 years, which is why I'd like your husband to come in for testing. Male factor infertility accounts for about 40% of conception difficulties, and in cases where he won't come. The words came out flat, defeated. He's already decided it's me. Dr. Chen had given me this look, professional, but with an edge of concern that went beyond medical. Mrs. Morrison, I need you to understand something. There is nothing defective about your body, nothing broken, nothing that needs fixing. If conception isn't happening, we need to look at both partners. But more importantly, he'd paused. How is your husband treating you during this process? I'd looked away. He's frustrated. We both are. Frustration is normal, but blame, contempt, those aren't about fertility. Those are about character. I'd left his office with a clean bill of health and a follow-up appointment scheduled for James, an appointment I knew he'd never attend. I was right. I'm not going to some quack who's just trying to take our money, James had said when I gave him the paperwork. Dr. Chen is clearly just trying to drum up more business by making you think the problem isn't you. It's a scam, Lily, and I'm not participating. But he's one of the top fertility specialists in the state. I don't care if he's the top specialist in the world. I don't need testing. The problem is obvious. That night, I'd found him in his study, looking at divorce attorney websites on his laptop. He hadn't even tried to hide it. James? He'd closed the laptop slowly. We need to talk, Lily, about our future, or our lack of one. I think we need some space, James had said, his voice carefully neutral, like he was discussing a business strategy, not the end of our marriage. Space? What does that mean? It means I'm moving into the apartment downtown, the one the firm keeps for late nights. I need time to think about whether this marriage is viable. Viable? The word tasted like poison. James, we're talking about our marriage, not a corporate merger. Aren't we, though? He'd stood up, straightening his tie. I entered this marriage with certain expectations. A family, children, a legacy. You can't provide that, so I need to evaluate my options. Your options? I'd felt something crack inside my chest. I'm your wife, not a stock portfolio. You're my wife who can't give me children, he'd said simply. After 3 years, Lily, 3 years of trying. Most of my colleagues have 2 or 3 kids by now. Do you know what it's like at the office? At family gatherings? Everyone asking when we're going to start our family, and I have to make excuses for you? Excuses for me? James, we don't even know. I know enough. He picked up a packed suitcase I hadn't noticed by the door. He'd already planned this, already packed. I'll be in touch through my attorney about next steps. Your attorney? My voice had gone small. Broken. You're divorcing me? I'm considering my options. He'd repeated, this separation will give us both clarity, give you time to figure things out. Maybe without the pressure of my expectations, you'll finally relax enough to conceive. Stranger things have happened. He'd actually said that. Like my body was just being stubborn and his absence would magically fix me. I'd believed him. God help me. I'd actually believed that's what the separation was about. space, clarity, a chance for us to reset. I'd spent the next 2 months in that house alone, going to therapy, doing yoga, reading every book on fertility and stress, convinced that if I just became the right version of myself, he'd come back. I discovered the truth on a Tuesday afternoon in March. James had texted asking me to drop off some documents he needed from his home office, contracts for a case he was working on. I'd driven to the house we still jointly owned, let myself in, and gone to his study. The contracts were exactly where he'd said they'd be, but underneath them was a folder I didn't recognize. I shouldn't have looked. I know that, but something made me open it. Inside were bank statements for an account I didn't know existed. Joint account, James Morrison and Christine Parker. Christine Parker, his paralegal, the 24-year-old who'd started at his firm 2 years ago, the one who was always at the office when he worked late, the one who'd sent him that text last Christmas, "Can't wait for our celebration tonight," that he'd explained away as a firm holiday party I wasn't invited to because it was just for lawyers and their assistants. The account had been opened 14 months ago, right around the time he'd started talking about separation, right around the time he'd started staying at the firm apartment more nights than not. The statements showed regular deposits, purchases at jewelry stores, a weekend trip to Napa Valley. During a weekend, he'd told me he was at a legal conference, payments to a real estate agent. They were already building a life together. While I was home doing fertility yoga and reading about stress reduction, he was planning his future with someone else. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and photographed every page. Then I found the letter underneath. Printed email from James to Christine. "Once the divorce is finalized, we can finally be public about us. I know these last 14 months have been difficult keeping a secret, but it's almost over. My attorney says with the infertility documentation, the separation will be clean. No one will blame me for leaving a wife who can't have children. Everyone will understand." The infertility documentation. He'd been documenting my failure as evidence. He'd building a case, creating a narrative where I was defective, and he was the victim forced to choose between his marriage vows and his dream of fatherhood. I'd confronted him that night, called him, demanded he come home. He'd arrived with his attorney. "You went through my private files," he'd said, his voice cold. "That's a violation of my privacy, Lily." "Your privacy?" "James, you have a secret bank account with another woman. You've been planning this divorce for over a year while you've been what? Failing to conceive?" "Yes, I'm aware." He'd sat down on our couch like he owned it, like I was the intruder. "Christine and I started seeing each other about 18 months ago. After it became clear you couldn't hold up your end of our marriage." "My end? I'm not a business contract." "Aren't you?" He'd glanced at his attorney, who was taking notes. "Marriage is an agreement. I provide financial stability, partnership, commitment. You were supposed to provide children. You failed. The contract is void." "When did you become this person?" I'd whispered. "When did you become someone who could say these things?" "I became this person," he'd said slowly, "when I realized I was wasting the best years of my life on someone defective." Defective. He'd actually used that word. "Christine is 24, he'd continued, healthy, from a fertile family. Her mother had 5 children. Her sister just had twins. We've discussed it. She wants a large family. She can actually provide what a wife is supposed to provide." His attorney had cleared his throat. "Mr. Morrison, perhaps we should focus on the settlement." "The settlement is simple," James had interrupted. "Lily gets her car, her personal belongings, and 6 months to vacate this house. Everything else stays with me. The house, the savings, the investments. After all, I earned them. She's contributed nothing of value to this marriage." The divorce moved quickly after that. James had already laid all the groundwork. But I didn't understand how thorough he'd been until I started getting the phone calls. First, it was my former mother-in-law. "Lily, I want you to know I don't blame you for this," she'd said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "James explained everything about your condition, about how you refused to seek proper help, about how the stress of your inadequacy was destroying him." "My inadequacy, Mrs. Morrison? I did seek help. The doctor said I was perfectly—" James told me about that doctor, How he tried to blame James instead. How he tried to scam you into unnecessary treatments. It's terrible how these fertility clinics prey on desperate women. But honey, sometimes you have to accept God's will. Not every woman is meant to be a mother. She'd already rewritten the whole story. I was the desperate, delusional woman chasing false hope. James was the patient husband finally accepting reality. Then my best friend from college, Tanya, called. Lily, I ran into James's brother Todd at the grocery store. He said, you'd been having a nervous breakdown, that you'd become obsessed with getting pregnant, and were refusing to accept that it wasn't going to happen. He said James tried everything to help you, but you wouldn't listen. That's not what happened. He also said you went through James's private files and tried to sabotage his career by making false accusations about him having an affair. Lily, what's going on? This doesn't sound like you. That's when I realized the scope of what James had done. He'd spent months, maybe longer, carefully planting a narrative to his family, to our mutual friends, to anyone who would listen. I was the unstable, infertile wife, losing my grip on reality. He was the devoted husband pushed to his breaking point. When he finally filed for divorce and his relationship with Christine came out, no one blamed him. No one questioned it. He deserves happiness. His mother had told anyone who'd listen. He gave poor Lily 3 years. But a man needs a family. He needs children. You can't blame him for choosing life over, well, even some of my own friends started pulling away. I'm sorry, Lily, one of them had said when I'd called crying. But I have to say, 3 years is a long time. And if you knew you had issues, maybe you should have been more understanding about James needing to move on. He wants to be a father. That's not a crime. The divorce settlement was worse than I'd imagined. James's attorney had built an airtight case. During our marriage, I'd left my pharmacy job to help James with his career, entertaining clients, managing the house, being available for his schedule. He'd insisted on it, actually. My wife doesn't need to work retail, he'd said. We don't need the money, and I need you available. Now that decision became evidence of my lack of contribution. The house, which we'd bought with his down payment and my savings, went to him entirely. I'd put $40,000 into that house. Gone. The joint savings account, $50,000 I'd helped build, was split 70-30 in his favor because he'd contributed more. My car was in his name because it was better for insurance. I had to buy it from him in the settlement. I walked away from a 4-year marriage with basically my clothes, my pharmacy degree, and $30,000. But worse than the money was the isolation. His family cut me off completely. Our mutual friends sided with him, the successful attorney with the bright future versus the broken woman who couldn't give him children. Even my own parents seemed disappointed in me. Well, my mother had said on the phone, maybe this is for the best. You can focus on your career now. Not every woman needs to be a mother. Why did everyone keep saying that? Like it was supposed to be comforting? 6 months after the divorce was finalized, the final invitation arrived. It was addressed to Lily Morrison at my new apartment, a 1-bedroom place in a part of town I'd never lived in before. The envelope was cream-colored, expensive, embossed with silver letters. James Morrison and Christine Parker. Request the pleasure of your company at their baby shower celebration, welcoming baby Morrison, due October 2019. I'd stared at that invitation for 20 minutes. Christine was pregnant. They'd been together publicly, officially together for less than 8 months. But of course she was pregnant because she wasn't defective. There was a handwritten note on the bottom in James's writing. Lily, I know this might be difficult for you, but Christine and I wanted to extend an invitation as a gesture of goodwill. We hope you can celebrate this blessing with us and find closure in knowing that everyone ends up where they're meant to be. No hard feelings. No hard feelings. The man had destroyed my life, stolen my money, turned everyone against me, and ended our marriage to immediately impregnate his mistress. And he wanted me to celebrate with them. I'd thrown the invitation in the trash. But then my sister Rachel had called. Please tell me you're not actually considering going to that, she'd said. Of course not. It's insane that he even invited me. Lily, it's not insane. It's calculated. Rachel worked in PR. She understood manipulation. He invited you knowing you won't come. Then he gets to tell everyone he extended an olive branch and you were too bitter to accept it. He's setting you up to be the villain one more time. So what am I supposed to do? I don't know. But I do know that right now, he's winning. He got to leave the marriage looking like a saint, got his young pregnant wife, got to keep all the assets, and gets to paint you as the sad, jealous ex-wife. Meanwhile, what's your story? What's your comeback? I didn't have one. I was living in a tiny apartment, working at a pharmacy chain, spending my evenings crying into microwave dinners and trying to figure out how I'd become the villain in my own life. 2 weeks before the baby shower, I had a follow-up appointment at Dr. Chen's clinic. I'd been putting it off. What was the point of fertility testing now? But I'd prepaid for the full workup and my insurance wouldn't refund it, so I figured I might as well go. I was early, so I'd gone to the small cafe attached to the medical building to get coffee. That's where I heard them. I'd been standing at the pickup counter waiting for my order when I heard James's voice from a booth around the corner. I still can't believe you actually invited her, a woman was saying, Christine. I recognized her voice from the one time I'd met her at a firm party back when I was too naive to see what was happening. I told you it was genius, James replied. Lily's been so pathetic since the divorce. Living in that sad little apartment, working retail pharmacy. No friends because everyone knows the truth about her. Having her show up looking miserable will make us look even better by comparison. But what if she doesn't come? Then we tell everyone we tried to include her and she was too bitter to accept. Either way, we win. But honestly, I think she'll come. She's desperate for connection. Desperate to prove she's not the failure everyone knows she is. Christine had giggled. Actually giggled. Do you think she's still obsessing over getting pregnant? God, probably. Remember how crazy she got near the end? All those ovulation kits and tracking apps? She was like a woman possessed. Meanwhile, you and I literally tried once and boom, pregnant. It's almost funny how easy it was. Almost seems cruel to invite her, though, Christine had said. But she didn't sound like she meant it. She sounded delighted. Christine, sweetheart, let me tell you something about Lily. She spent 4 years of marriage being useless. Couldn't give me children. Couldn't even hold down a real career. The least she can do is serve as a cautionary tale at our baby shower. Here's what happens when you fail at being a woman. They'd both laughed. I'd stood there frozen, my coffee growing cold in my hand. Plus, James had continued, my mother specifically requested we invite her. She wants to see Lily's face when she realizes what she lost. Mom never liked her anyway. Thought she was beneath our family. Your mom is going to love this shower, Christine had said. Everything's perfect. The venue, the decorations, the catering, and having your sad, barren ex-wife there as a reminder of what you escaped. Chef's kiss. Speaking of which, James had said, we should go. I have that appointment at Dr. Chen's office. I'd felt ice flood my veins. Why are you going to a fertility doctor if I'm already pregnant? Christine had asked. I'm picking up my test results. Remember? I did that sperm analysis months ago, before we started trying, wanted to make sure everything was working perfectly. And count was excellent, motility was top tier, just wanted it documented that the problem was definitely never me. You never told Lily you got tested? Why would I? She was already convinced she was the problem. No reason to confuse things with facts. Besides, having that documentation made the divorce easier. Wife is infertile, husband is proven fertile, the narrative wrote itself. My coffee cup had slipped from my hand and shattered on the tile floor. They'd heard it. James had poked his head around the corner, and for one perfect moment, our eyes met. His face had gone pale, then red, then carefully neutral. Lily, he'd said, what are you doing here? I'd looked at him, really looked at him, and seen him clearly for the first time in years. Not the man I'd married, not the man I'd thought I knew, but a stranger wearing a mask that had finally slipped. Getting coffee? I'd said quietly, before my appointment with Dr. Chen, for my follow-up fertility tests. He'd actually flinched. How much did you hear? Enough. I bent down to pick up the pieces of my broken cup, grateful for an excuse not to look at him. Congratulations on your baby, James. And congratulations on the test results that proved you were fertile all along, while you were telling me I was defective. Christine had appeared beside him, her hand protectively on her barely visible baby bump. James, we're going to be late. I'll be there, I'd said, standing up with my hand full of ceramic shards. At your baby shower, I'll definitely be there. I'd walked away before he could respond, dropping the broken cup in the trash and heading to Dr. Chen's office with my hands shaking and something like molten steel forming in my chest. Dr. Chen's appointment had been routine. More blood work, more questions about my cycle, my health, my plans. Miss Morrison now. He'd corrected himself gently. Your test results continue to show completely normal fertility markers. I want to make sure you understand. There is nothing wrong with you. If you decide to try for children in the future with a different partner, I see no medical reason why you wouldn't be successful. What if the problem was never medical? I'd ask quietly. He'd given me a long look. What do you mean? What if someone was deliberately preventing conception? Could that happen without the other person knowing? Dr. Chen had set down his tablet. That's a serious question. Are you asking me if your ex-husband might have been using contraception without your knowledge? He had a vasectomy consultation scheduled, I'd said suddenly. Remembering 2 years into our marriage, I found the appointment card in his wallet. He said it was a mistake, that the office had sent it to him instead of his brother. But what if... Miss Morrison, I can't make accusations without evidence, but I will tell you this. In my 20 years practicing fertility medicine, I've seen several cases where one partner was secretly using contraception while the other partner was led to believe they were trying to conceive. It's a form of reproductive coercion. It's abuse. The word had hung in the air between us. If you want to pursue this, if you think your ex-husband may have test results at this clinic, you could request a subpoena as part of... No, I'd said quickly, I don't want to pursue anything. I just want to move on. But I hadn't moved on. I'd gone home to my tiny apartment, looked at that baby shower invitation still sitting on my counter, and felt something inside me shatter completely. James had won. He'd stolen years of my life, convinced me I was broken, destroyed my reputation, taken my money, and was now parading his pregnant mistress around while I lived alone in a one-bedroom apartment, working a job I'd only taken because I was desperate. And he'd invited me to his baby shower, specifically to humiliate me one more time, to show the world that he'd upgraded, that he'd escaped the defective wife and found someone who worked properly. I'd sat on the floor of my bathroom that night, the same bathroom where I'd taken dozens of negative pregnancy tests while married to James, and thought about how easy it would be to just stop. Stop trying, stop hurting, stop being the punchline to everyone's joke about the woman who couldn't even do the one thing women were supposedly designed to do. My phone had rung. Rachel. Lily? Are you okay? You didn't answer my text? I'm fine, I'd lied. You're not fine. I can hear it in your voice. What happened? I told her everything. The overheard conversation. The fertility test results that proved I was normal. The implication that James might have been preventing conception all along while blaming me for it. That son of a... Rachel had actually growled. Lily, you need to destroy him. I need to what? Show up to his baby shower and make a scene? Tell everyone he's a liar? They won't believe me, Rachel. They'll think I'm the bitter ex-wife making things up because I'm jealous. I have no proof. Just overheard conversations and suspicions. Then get proof. How? I don't know yet. But Lily, listen to me. You're not broken. You're not defective. You're not any of the things he told you. And you're sure as hell not going to let him win by giving up now. He already won. Now, Rachel had said firmly, he thinks he won, but the game's not over until you say it is, and I don't hear you saying it. I'd hung up the phone and looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. Really looked. I was 30 years old. I had a doctorate in pharmacy. I had a clean bill of health from one of the best fertility specialists in the state. I had $30,000 in the bank, and I had nothing left to lose. That's when I'd made the decision that would change everything. I picked up the phone and called Dr. Chen's after-hours emergency line. Dr. Chen, this is Lily Morrison. I know this is going to sound crazy, but I need to ask you something. If someone wanted to have a baby, maybe more than one baby, and they wanted to do it quickly, efficiently, without a partner, what would you recommend? There was a long pause. Miss Morrison, are you asking about IVF with donor sperm? I'm asking about the fastest, most effective way to go from zero to pregnant. Money is not an obstacle. Time is not an obstacle. I just want to know, can it be done? Another pause. Then why don't you come in tomorrow morning? Let's talk about your options. The next morning, I sat in Dr. Chen's office at 7 a.m. before the clinic officially opened. He'd brought coffee. Real coffee, not the cafeteria stuff. He'd also brought his colleague, Dr. Melissa Torres, a reproductive endocrinologist who specialized in IVF. Miss Morrison, Dr. Chen had started carefully. Before we discuss any medical procedures, I need to make sure you're approaching this decision from a healthy place. Last night on the phone, you sounded desperate. I'd finished, unhinged, like a woman having a breakdown. Determined, he'd corrected gently. But I need to know why. Why now? Why this urgency? So I told them everything, not just the divorce, but the overheard conversation, the baby shower invitation designed to humiliate me, the years of being told I was defective, the systematic destruction of my self-worth. I'm not doing this to prove anything to James, I'd said. Or maybe I am, partly, but mostly. I'm doing this because I'm 30 years old, and I've spent the last 4 years believing I couldn't have children. Now I know that's not true. Now I know the only thing standing between me and motherhood is a man who doesn't deserve that power over my life anymore. Dr. Torres had leaned forward. Lily, can I call you Lily? I'd nodded. Lily, what you're describing is possible, but it's not simple, and it's not easy. IVF is physically demanding, emotionally exhausting, and expensive. Even with the best conditions, success rates for a single cycle are around 50% for someone your age. What if I wanted to increase those odds? You could do multiple embryo transfers, but that raises the risk of multiples. I want multiples? I'd interrupt it. I want the highest chance of success in the shortest amount of time. I want to walk into that baby shower pregnant, or better yet, with a baby, multiple babies, if possible. Dr. Chen and Dr. Torres had exchanged glances. Lily, Dr. Chen had said slowly, what you're describing, aggressive IVF with multiple embryo transfer could result in twins, triplets, even quadruplets. Are you prepared for that possibility? I'm prepared for anything that isn't spending the rest of my life believing James's lies about me. Dr. Torres had pulled out a tablet and started typing. Okay, let's talk timeline. Your last cycle was 2 weeks ago, which means we can start ovarian stimulation almost immediately. We'll do an aggressive stim protocol, maximum viable eggs, then fertilization with donor sperm. You'll need to choose a donor, then we'll let the embryos develop to blastocyst stage, test them for viability, and transfer the strongest ones. How many would you transfer? I'd asked. Standard practice is 1, maybe 2 embryos to minimize the risk of high-order multiples. What if I wanted 3 or 4? Dr. Torres had looked at me seriously. Lily, I need you to understand what you're asking. Transferring 3 or 4 embryos significantly increases the risk of triplets or quadruplets. Multiple pregnancies are high risk, bed rest, potential complications, premature delivery. And raising multiples alone? I won't be alone, I'd said, though I had no idea if that was true. I have my sister. I have savings. I have determination. What I don't have is time. That baby shower is in 3 months. Can we do this or not? Dr. Chen had looked at me for a long moment. We can do this, he'd said finally. But Lily, whatever happens, whether this works or doesn't work, you need to promise me you'll take care of your mental health. See a therapist, build a support system, because having a baby or multiple babies won't heal what James did to you. That healing has to come from somewhere else. I know, I'd said. And I had known on some level, but I'd also known that I needed to prove to myself more than anyone that I wasn't what he'd called me. We'd started that week. The IVF process consumed my life for the next 2 months. I told work I needed extended medical leave. I told my family I was focusing on myself and needed space. I told Rachel everything, and she'd moved into my apartment to help. The ovarian stimulation was brutal. Daily injections, hormones that made me feel like I was losing my mind. Bloating, mood swings, exhaustion. This is hell. I told Rachel one night, lying on the couch with a heating pad on my swollen abdomen. This is temporary, she'd corrected. James's opinion of you, that was the real hell. This is you taking your power back. Egg retrieval happened on a Friday in June. He'd retrieved 23 eggs. Dr. Torres had been thrilled. This is an excellent result, Lily. Now we wait for fertilization. I'd chosen donor sperm from a database that felt surreal. Height, education, eye color, medical history. I'd picked someone who looked nothing like James. Tall, yes, but dark-haired where James was blonde. A software engineer with a PhD where James was a lawyer. Someone who donated because he believed in helping people build families. Of the 23 eggs, 18 fertilized. Of those 18, 13 made it to blastocyst. Of those 13, 10 were genetically normal. 10 perfect embryos, Dr. Torres had told me. Lily, this is exceptional. You have enough here for multiple attempts, which means we can be conservative with the first transfer. I want to transfer 4, I'd said. Lily, 4. I know the risks. I know what I'm asking, but I want 4. Dr. Chen had been called in for a consultation, then their ethics board, then a therapist who'd evaluated whether I was mentally competent to make this decision. In the end, they'd agreed to transfer 3 embryos, with the understanding that if all 3 implanted, I was accepting the risk of triplets. The transfer happened on a Tuesday morning in July. I'd watched on the ultrasound screen as 3 tiny clusters of cells were placed in my uterus. 3 possible futures. 3 chances at proving James wrong. Now we wait, Dr. Torres had said, 2 weeks until we can test for pregnancy. Those 2 weeks were the longest of my life. I'd gone back to work after the transfer, trying to keep my mind occupied. That's where I met him. Adrian Chen. Yes, that Adrian Chen. My fertility doctor. It happened at a medical conference I'd been required to attend for work, something about new pharmaceutical protocols. He'd been giving a keynote speech about advances in reproductive medicine. Afterward, I'd approached him, partly because I knew him and partly because I needed to thank him. Dr. Chen, I just wanted to say, Lily. He'd smiled, and I'd realized I'd never seen him smile outside of clinical settings. How are you feeling? Any symptoms yet? Too early to tell. But I'm hanging in there. I'm glad to hear it. And please, outside the clinic, call me Adrian. We're colleagues in a way, both healthcare professionals. We'd ended up having coffee. Then dinner. Not romantic, at least not at first. Just 2 people talking about medicine, about life, about the complicated ethics of fertility treatment. Can I ask you something? I'd said over dessert. Why did you agree to transfer 3 embryos for me? Your ethics board must have fought you on it. He'd been quiet for a moment. Because I believed you, he'd said finally. I believed you when you said you understood the risks. I believed you knew what you wanted. And honestly, after everything I'd observed about your ex-husband during that one appointment he deigned to attend, I wanted you to win. Win? Against him. Against the narrative he created about you, against the system that lets men blame women for fertility issues that are often male factor or unexplained. You deserved a chance to prove that you were never the problem. That's when I'd started seeing him differently. Not as my doctor, not as a professional colleague, but as someone who'd seen me at my lowest and still believed I was capable of extraordinary things. We'd started spending more time together. Carefully, because of the ethics, he'd officially transferred my care to Dr. Torres to avoid conflicts of interest. I want to be clear about something. He'd said 3 days before my pregnancy test. I'm interested in you, Lily. Not as a patient, not as a case study. As a woman, I find remarkable and brave and frankly fascinating. But I also know your life is about to potentially change in a massive way. So I'm not asking for anything. I just want you to know you're not alone in this. When I'd gone in for my blood test, he'd been there even though he wasn't officially my doctor anymore. Dr. Torres had come out with the results personally. Her face unreadable. Lily, she'd said, you're pregnant. I'd felt my knees go weak. Adrian had caught my arm. How pregnant? I'd whispered. She'd smiled then. Actually smiled. Very pregnant? Your HCG levels are at 847. For reference, that's significantly higher than typical for this early in a pregnancy. What does that mean? It likely means more than one embryo implanted. We'll do an ultrasound in 2 weeks to confirm, but Lily, I think you might be having twins, possibly triplets. I'd looked at Adrian and he'd looked back at me with something like awe in his eyes. You did it, he'd said quietly. You actually did it. The 6-week ultrasound was on a Friday morning in August. Rachel had come with me. So had Adrian, sitting quietly in the corner of the exam room while Dr. Torres did the scan. Okay, Lily, Dr. Torres had said, moving the wand across my abdomen. Let's see what we've got here. The screen had filled with gray and black shapes. She'd been quiet for a moment, moving the wand, clicking measurements. Dr. Torres? I'd said, my voice tight. Is everything okay? She'd turned the screen toward me. Everything is more than okay. Lily, you're having quadruplets. The room had gone silent. I'm sorry, what? Rachel had said. 4 gestational sacs. 4 fetal poles. 4 heartbeats. Dr. Torres had pointed at the screen. See? 1, 2, 3, 4. All measuring appropriately for gestational age. All with strong cardiac activity. But you only transferred 3 embryos, I'd said, my voice barely above a whisper. One of them split, Dr. Torres had said, her voice filled with wonder. You have 3 fraternal embryos and 1 set of identical twins. Lily, this is extremely rare. The odds of this happening are astronomical. Adrian had finished. He'd moved to stand beside me, looking at the screen with professional fascination. Lily, do you understand what this means? I'd stared at the screen. 4 tiny flickers, 4 heartbeats, 4 babies, 4 ways to prove James wrong. It means I'm gonna need a bigger apartment, I'd said, and then I'd started laughing, and then crying, and then laughing again while crying. Rachel had grabbed my hand. Lily, are you okay? I'm having 4 babies, I'd said. James spent 3 years telling me I was defective, that I couldn't have children, that my body was broken, and I'm having 4 babies. Dr. Torres had printed out a dozen ultrasound photos, 4 gestational sacs, perfectly aligned on the screen like a constellation. I need to be clear about the risks, she'd said. Quadruplet pregnancies are high risk. You'll need intensive monitoring, likely bed rest in the 3rd trimester. Possible complications, the babies will almost certainly be premature. I don't care, I'd said. I'll do whatever it takes. I know you will, she'd said gently. And we're going to support you every step of the way. After the appointment, Adrian had driven me home. Rachel had gone ahead to prepare things, whatever that meant. In the car, Adrian had been quiet. You're freaking out, I'd said finally. I'm not freaking out. You're gripping the steering wheel like you're trying to strangle it. He'd pulled into a parking lot and turned to face me. Lily, I need to say something and I need you to hear me clearly. Okay? I meant what I said before about being interested in you, about wanting to be part of your life. But now you're having quadruplets, 4 babies. And I need to know if you're okay with me being part of this. Because I don't want to be the doctor who helped you get pregnant. I don't want to be the guy who swoops in and saves the day. I want to be the person who stands beside you while you save yourself. But only if that's what you want. I'd looked at him, really looked at him. This man who'd believe me when no one else did, who'd fought his ethics board to give me a chance, who'd seen me at my most desperate and still somehow saw me as strong. Adrian, I'm about to be massively pregnant with 4 babies. I'm going to be huge and uncomfortable and probably insufferable. My ex-husband is about to lose his mind when he finds out. My life is about to become chaos. Are you absolutely sure? He'd kissed me. Gentle, careful, like I was something precious. I'm sure, he'd said. I've never been more sure of anything. That night, Rachel had organized a small celebration at my apartment. Just her, me, Adrian, and the ultrasound photos spread across my coffee table. So Rachel had said, pouring sparkling cider into champagne flutes, let's talk strategy. The baby shower is in 3 weeks. You're going to be, 9 weeks pregnant? 9 weeks and very pregnant? Dr. Torres had told me. With multiples? You show much earlier. You'll look about 4 months pregnant by then? Perfect, Rachel had said, a wicked gleam in her eye. So here's what we're going to do. Over the next 3 weeks, I'd transformed my life with surgical precision. First, the apartment. Adrian had helped me move into a bigger place, a 3-bedroom condo in a better neighborhood, close to the hospital, close to his clinic, room for 4 cribs, and a support system. You don't have to do this, I'd told him as he'd assembled the 4th crib. I wanna, he'd said simply. Besides, I'm gonna need practice if I'm gonna be around. Second, my appearance. I'd stopped hiding, stopped trying to be invisible. I'd gone to a salon and had my hair professionally done, bought maternity clothes that were stylish, expensive, that made me look glowing instead of tired. Invested in good makeup, good jewelry. You look incredible, Rachel had said when she'd seen me, like a completely different person. I feel like a completely different person, I'd admitted, for the first time in years. I feel like, third, the narrative. I'd quietly reconnected with a few old friends. Not the ones who'd sided with James, but the ones who'd drifted away because they hadn't known what to say. Lily? Oh my God, I've been thinking about you. How are you? I'm pregnant. I'd say simply, with quadruplets. I'm due in March. What? How? That's amazing. IVF, donor sperm. Turns out there was never anything wrong with me. I just needed to get away from the person who was making me think I was broken. Word had spread quickly. By the time the baby shower rolled around, people knew, not everything, but enough. The morning of the shower, I'd stood in front of my mirror, looking at my reflection, 9 weeks pregnant with quadruplets. And I looked at least 4 months along. My stomach was round, unmistakable, glowing with health and possibility. I'd dressed carefully, a fitted maternity dress in deep emerald green that hugged my curves and made my pregnancy impossible to ignore. Heels, professional makeup, hair down in soft waves. Adrian had come up behind me, wrapping his arms carefully around my waist, his hands resting on my stomach. You don't have to do this, he'd said quietly. You don't have to go to their baby shower. You don't owe James anything. I know, I'd said, but I'm not doing this for James. I'm doing this for the version of me who sat in that bathroom 6 months ago, convinced she was worthless. She deserves to see how this story ends. How does it end? I'd smiled at our reflection in the mirror. With the truth. The Rosewood estate was exactly the kind of venue James would choose. Ostentatious, expensive, designed to impress. Adrian had driven me, his hands steady on my knee as we'd pulled up the circular driveway. Last chance to turn around, he'd said, not a chance. Rachel had arrived separately, already inside doing reconnaissance. Okay, she'd texted about 80 people, mostly James's family and colleagues. Christine is holding court in the main ballroom. She's maybe 5 months along, showing just a little, very smug. James is playing the proud father-to-be. His mother is here. And Lily, they have a slideshow playing. Pictures of James and Christine's journey to parenthood. Some of the slides literally say things like, after years of disappointment, James finally found his blessing. They're not even trying to be subtle. I'd read the text to Adrian. These people are truly something else, he'd said, shaking his head. You ready? More than ready. We'd gotten out of the car. I'd straightened my dress, feeling the weight of my 4 babies, my living proof, my vindication. Adrian had offered his arm. Tall, distinguished, successful in his own right. Not arm candy. A partner. Dr. Lillian Chen, I'd said softly, testing out the name I'd started using, my maiden name and his last name combined professionally. I like the sound of that. It has a nice ring to it, he'd agreed. Though technically we'd have to get married for you to officially be Dr. Chen. Is that a proposal? That's a man who knows better than to propose in a parking lot before you walk into your ex-husband's baby shower. But ask me again later. I'd laughed, and some of the tension had released from my shoulders. We'd walked to the entrance. 6B, the entrance. The doors to the main ballroom were open. I could hear music, laughter, the clink of glasses. Rachel had been waiting just inside. When she'd seen me, her face had lit up. "Oh, this is gonna be good," she'd whispered. "You look like a goddess, an extremely pregnant goddess." "Where are they?" "Center of the room, near the gift table. Christine is opening presents. James is taking photos. His mother is narrating every gift like it's a biblical event. Your timing is perfect." Everyone's gathered around, watching. I'd taken a deep breath. Adrian had squeezed my hand. "You've got this." We'd walked into the ballroom. The first person to notice was James's cousin, Kelly. I'd watched her face change from polite smile to confused recognition to shocked realization as her eyes traveled from my face to my very pregnant stomach. She'd dropped her champagne flute. The sound of shattering glass had drawn attention. Heads had turned. Conversations had stopped. I'd walked further into the room, Adrian beside me, Rachel trailing behind with her phone out, recording everything. James's brother Todd had seen me next. His jaw had literally dropped open. "Lily?" he'd said loud enough for others to hear. "Lily Morrison?" More heads turning, more whispers starting. And then James had seen me. I'd watched the color drain from his face, watched him blink like he was seeing a mirage, watched his eyes travel down to my stomach and stay there processing what he was seeing. Christine had followed his gaze. Her hand had gone protectively to her own small baby bump. The entire room had gone quiet. I'd walked straight toward them, my heels clicking on the marble floor, each step deliberate. James's mother, Patricia, had stood up from her seat near the gift table. "Lily, what are you doing here?" "And pregnant?" I'd finished, my voice clear and carrying in the silent room. "Yes, Patricia, I am. Thank you for noticing." James had found his voice first. "Lily, we didn't think you'd actually come." "Oh, I know exactly what you thought." I'd said pleasantly. "You thought I'd show up looking pathetic and desperate. Alone. Miserable. A cautionary tale about what happens to defective women who can't give their husbands children. Isn't that right?" His face had gone red. "That's not... I never said..." "You did, actually, 3 months ago. At the cafe attached to the medical building on 5th Street. You and Christine had a very illuminating conversation about why you'd invited me. Something about wanting me here so your mother could see my face when I realized what I'd lost." The room had erupted in murmurs. Patricia had gone pale. Christine had stepped forward, her voice sharp. "You were eavesdropping?" "I was getting coffee." "You were broadcasting your cruelty to anyone within earshot. There's a difference." James, Christine had hissed, "Make her leave." Actually, I'd said I was invited by James himself, so I'll leave when I'm ready. But first, I think everyone here deserves to know the truth. The real truth. Not the version James has been telling. "Lily, don't do this," James had said, his voice low, threatening. "Don't make a scene." "A scene? James, you invited your infertile ex-wife to your baby shower specifically to humiliate her. I think you made the scene. I'm just providing context." Adrian had stepped slightly forward, not intervening but present. A reminder that I wasn't alone this time. Todd had spoken up from the crowd. "Lily, I don't understand. Is that baby yours?" "Babies?" I'd corrected, my hand on my stomach. "Plural. I'm having quadruplets. 4 healthy babies, due in March." The room had exploded. "Quadruplets? But James said you couldn't..." "How is that possible?" Patricia had pushed forward, her face twisted with confusion and something like anger. "This doesn't make sense. James said you were infertile, that you'd been tested, that doctors confirmed you couldn't have children." "Did he?" I'd looked directly at James. And that's interesting because I was tested extensively by Dr. Adrian Chen, one of the top fertility specialists on the West Coast. And you know what he found? Nothing. Absolutely nothing wrong with my fertility. I gestured to Adrian. Dr. Chen, would you like to explain to everyone here what my test results showed? Adrian had stepped forward, his voice professional. Miss Morrison's ovarian reserve was excellent. Her hormone levels were optimal. Her reproductive system showed no abnormalities whatsoever. Medically speaking, there was never any reason she couldn't conceive and carry a healthy pregnancy. But James said Patricia had looked at her son, confusion giving way to dawning horror. James said a lot of things. I'd continued. He said I was defective. He said I was broken. He said I was the reason we couldn't have children. But here's what James didn't tell you. He refused to get tested himself, refused to see Dr. Chen when I begged him to, refused to even consider that the problem might not be me. That's not true, James had said, but his voice lacked conviction. We both knew it was you. The doctors said, what doctors, James? I'd asked. Name one, because the only doctor I saw cleared me completely. So either you're lying about doctors confirming I was infertile, or I'd let the implication hang in the air. One of James's colleagues, a woman I vaguely recognized from firm parties, had spoken up. Wait, are you saying James knew you weren't infertile? I'm saying James had access to my medical records. He knew exactly what Dr. Chen's tests showed, and he chose to ignore them and continue telling everyone, including me, that I was the problem. This is insane. Christine had interjected. James, tell them she's lying. Tell them, actually, Christine, let's talk about timing. I'd said, turning to address the room. James and I tried to conceive for 3 years. 3 years of negative pregnancy tests. 3 years of him telling me something was wrong with me. We divorced in November of last year. James and Christine went public with their relationship in January. She announced her pregnancy in May. That's 4 months. But here's the interesting part. I'd pulled out my phone, pulling up a photo. This is my IVF timeline. I started the process in June. 1 cycle, 3 embryos transferred. And now I'm carrying quadruplets. I'd looked directly at James. So either I magically became fertile the moment I left you, or I was never infertile to begin with. Which do you think is more likely? The room had gone completely silent. James's face had been scarlet. You're twisting everything. You don't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly? Would you like to know what else I understand? That you had test results done at Dr. Chen's clinic. Sperm analysis. Done months before we divorced. Results that showed excellent count and motility. Results that proved you were fertile. Results you never shared with me. Gasps around the room. Patricia had actually stumbled backward, caught by Todd. How do you, James, had started? I was at the clinic the day you went to pick them up. I heard you tell Christine all about how you'd gotten tested, but never told me. How you'd used those results as documentation for the divorce. Wife is infertile, husband is proven fertile. I believe those were your exact words. Christine had gone pale. James, you told me she knew you'd been tested. You said, he lied to you too, Christine, I'd said, almost gently, just like he lied to me, just like he's been lying to everyone. James had finally snapped. Fine. You want the truth? Here's the truth. I didn't want to have children with you, Lily. Is that what you want to hear? You were boring, you were clingy, you had no ambition beyond playing house and popping out babies. I met Christine and realized what I'd been missing. Someone young, exciting, successful in her own right. So yes, I made sure we didn't conceive. I used protection every time without telling you. I sabotaged your ovulation tracking. I did everything I could to make sure I didn't trap myself with your children when I'd already found someone better. The room had erupted. Multiple people shouting. Patricia had put her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. But I'd felt strangely calm, because he'd just confirmed everything. Thank you for that, I'd said quietly, for finally admitting it, for finally telling the truth about who you really are. What are you going to do? James had sneered. Sue me. For what? Faking infertility isn't illegal. Being done with a disappointing marriage isn't a crime. No, I'd agreed, but reproductive coercion is, and fraud, and lying in divorce proceedings. And all of that is documented now, thanks to this lovely baby shower you invited me to. Rachel had stepped forward, holding up her phone, every word recorded, time-stamped, with about 80 witnesses. James had gone white. But you know what, James? I'd said, and my voice had been steady, strong. I'm not going to sue you. I'm not going to destroy your career or your reputation, even though I could. Because you know what? You already did that yourself. Everyone here heard what you just admitted. Everyone here knows exactly what kind of person you are now. I'd looked around the room, at Patricia, crying, at Todd, looking disgusted, at James's colleagues, whispering to each other, at Christine, staring at James like she was seeing him for the first time. You wanted me here so people could see what I'd lost. So here I am, 9 weeks pregnant with quadruplets, healthy, glowing, in a relationship with a man who's brilliant, successful, and kind. A man who saw me at my absolute lowest and still believed I was worthy of respect and love. A man who fought his own ethics board to give me a chance at motherhood because he believed in me that much. I'd turned to Adrian, who'd stepped forward to stand beside me. Adrian Chen, everyone. My doctor, my partner, and soon, if I'm lucky, my husband. Adrian had smiled, his hand finding mine. I turned back to James. So thank you, James. Thank you for the 3 years of emotional abuse that taught me what I won't tolerate. Thank you for the lies that taught me to verify everything. Thank you for the divorce that freed me to become the woman I was always meant to be. And thank you for inviting me here today so everyone could see exactly who won in the end. This is insane, James had said, but he'd sounded defeated. You're insane. This whole thing is karma. I'd finished. This whole thing is karma. And she's got one hell of a sense of humor. Patricia had approached me then, tears still streaming down her face. Lily, I'm so sorry. I said terrible things to you. I believed everything James told me. I thought you were defective. I'd supplied, broken, not meant to be a mother. She'd nodded, sobbing. Can you ever forgive me? I don't know, I'd said honestly. You spent 2 years treating me like I was less than human because I couldn't give your son children. It turns out your son was the problem all along. And now you want forgiveness because it's convenient. That's not how it works, Patricia. Todd had approached next, his wife Jennifer beside him. Lily, if any of us had known what he was doing, you would have what? I'd asked. Believed me? Or would you have still sided with James because he's family? Todd had looked ashamed. I don't know. But for what it's worth, I believe you now. And James, he turned to his brother. James, what you did is unforgivable. Reproductive coercion? Fraud? Destroying someone's sense of self-worth for years? That's not just wrong, it's evil. Christine had been standing alone near the gift table, one hand on her small bump, the other covering her mouth. I'd approached her carefully. Christine, I know you think I'm here to gloat. And maybe I am a little, but mainly I'm here to warn you because you're about to have a baby with a man who lied to his first wife for 3 years about why she couldn't get pregnant. A man who sabotaged her reproductive choices, a man who used her infertilities as an excuse to divorce her and take everything, when he'd been causing the infertility himself. He wouldn't do that to me, Christine had whispered, but she'd sounded uncertain. Maybe he won't, I'd agreed. Maybe you're different. Maybe you're special enough that he'll actually be the person he pretends to be. But ask yourself, if he could lie to me for 3 years, if he could manipulate me into believing I was broken, if he could sabotage my reproductive choices and then blame me for the results, what makes you think you're safe? Christine had looked at James, who'd been standing frozen, surrounded by horrified family members and colleagues, whispering to each other. Think very carefully about who you've chosen to have a child with, I'd said quietly, because once that baby is born, you're tied to him forever. And if he can do this to someone he claimed to love, what do you think he'll do to someone who's just convenient? I'd stepped back, taken Adrian's arm, and looked around the room one last time. Enjoy your baby shower, everyone. And congratulations, James and Christine. I hope parenthood brings you everything you deserve. The weight of that last sentence, everything you deserve, had hung in the air like a curse. Rachel had appeared at my other side, still recording, capturing the stunned faces, the whispered conversations, the way James's colleagues were subtly moving away from him. "Ready to go?" she'd asked. More than ready. We'd walked toward the exit, but before we'd left, I'd turned back one more time. "Oh, and James, one more thing." He'd looked at me, his face a mask of humiliation and rage. "Those test results from Dr. Chen, the ones that proved you were fertile, I have copies, time-stamped, from before our divorce, along with copies of your bank statements showing you bought condoms during our marriage while telling me we were trying to conceive, along with records of you changing my ovulation app settings. Yes, I found those too, along with testimonies from friends who heard you admit you were sabotaging our attempts to have children." His face had drained of all color. "I wasn't going to use them. I was going to let you live your life and move on with mine. But then you invited me here. You tried to humiliate me one more time. So now all of that documentation is with my attorney. Not to sue you. I don't need your money. But to make sure that if you ever try to paint yourself as the victim again, if you ever try to blame another woman for your own choices, if you ever try to manipulate anyone the way you manipulated me, the truth will be waiting. You can't." He'd started. "I already did. Have a wonderful life, James. I know I will." And with that, I'd walked out of the Rosewood estate with my head high, my hand in Adrian's, my sister by my side, and 4 babies growing inside me. Behind us, I'd heard the explosion of conversation, accusations, denials, the sound of James's carefully constructed life falling apart. In the car, Adrian had turned to me. "How do you feel?" I'd thought about it, really thought about it. "Free." I'd said finally, for the first time in 4 years, "I feel completely free." Rachel had leaned forward from the back seat. "That was the most badass thing I've ever witnessed. Lily, you destroyed him. You absolutely destroyed him." "No," I'd corrected. "I didn't destroy him. I just stopped letting him destroy me. He destroyed himself." Adrian had lifted my hand to his lips, kissing my knuckles gently. "Where to now?" "Home," I'd said, one hand on my belly where 4 heartbeats were growing stronger every day. "Take me home." That was 8 months ago. I'm sitting here now, in the nursery Adrian and I finished decorating last week, looking at 4 cribs lined up against the wall, 4 mobiles spinning slowly in the afternoon light, 4 sets of tiny clothes folded and waiting. My daughters, Sophia, Olivia, Grace, and Hope, are due in 2 weeks. At 32 weeks pregnant with quadruplets, I'm officially on bed rest, but honestly, I've never felt more alive. James spent so much time trying to destroy me that he never realized he was actually freeing me to become someone extraordinary. He wanted me to believe I was broken. Instead, he broke the chains that were holding me back from discovering who I really was. The aftermath of that baby shower was, within 48 hours, the video Rachel recorded had been shared among James's entire social and professional circle. Not publicly. I'm not vindictive enough for that, but privately, among the people who needed to know the truth. His law firm quietly asked him to take a leave of absence while they reviewed certain concerns about his character and judgment. 3 of his major clients requested new representation. His partnership track was indefinitely suspended. Patricia called me 2 weeks after the shower. She didn't ask for forgiveness again. She just said, "I'm setting up a trust fund for your daughters. It's the least I can do for the grandchildren I don't deserve to know." I didn't refuse it. My daughters deserve security. And Patricia's guilt doesn't change that. Todd and Jennifer reached out too. Jennifer sent a care package, books about raising multiples, gift cards for baby supplies, and a handwritten note that said, "You were always too good for this family. Congratulations on your beautiful life." Christine left James 3 months into her pregnancy. I heard about it through the grapevine. Apparently, she'd started digging into his past after the baby shower, found other inconsistencies, other lies, other women he'd manipulated. She moved back to her parents' house and filed for full custody before their son was even born. I don't take pleasure in that. I genuinely hope she and her baby are okay. Nobody deserves to be manipulated the way James manipulates people. But I'd be lying if I said there wasn't a certain symmetry to it. The man who claimed he needed to leave his infertile wife to have children is now a divorced father with supervised visitation, estranged from his family, and professionally ruined. Not because I destroyed him, but because the truth did. As for James himself, I haven't heard from him directly since the baby shower, but I did receive one message forwarded through my attorney. It said, "I never meant for things to go this far. I just wanted a family." I had my attorney respond, "You had a family, you destroyed it. Those are different things." If you've been following my story, if you've made it this far, I want you to hear this. If you've ever been told you're not enough, if you've ever been discarded by someone who was supposed to love you, if you've ever been made to feel broken by someone else's cruelty, if you've ever believed the lies someone told you about your worth, your body, your value as a human being, remember this: their opinion of your worth says everything about them and nothing about you. James spent 3 years convincing me I was defective. He sabotaged my health, my confidence, my sense of self. He made me believe that my body was broken, that I was failing at the one thing I was supposed to be able to do. But here's what I learned. My body was never broken. My spirit was never defective. My worth was never dependent on his approval. The problem was never me. The problem was that I'd given someone else the power to define my reality. When I took that power back, when I decided to trust medical science over his lies, when I chose to invest in myself instead of begging him to see my value, everything changed. I didn't change who I was. I just stopped letting him tell me who I was, and that made all the difference. There are people in this world who will try to convince you that you're broken so they can position themselves as your savior, so they can control you, so they can keep you small and dependent and grateful for whatever scraps of affection they deign to throw your way. Those people are not loving you. They're using you. Real love doesn't require you to believe you're worthless. Real love doesn't systematically destroy your confidence. Real love doesn't gaslight you about your own reality. Real love, like what I found with Adrian, sees you clearly and cherishes what it sees. It builds you up instead of tearing you down. It celebrates your strength instead of exploiting your vulnerabilities. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button. Not just for me, but for everyone who's ever been told they're not enough by someone who was never worthy of them in the first place. Subscribe to this channel for more stories about people who refuse to let someone else's cruelty define their future, because these stories matter. Your story matters. Drop a comment telling me, what's one lie someone told you about yourself that you finally stopped believing? Let's fill this comment section with truth-telling and reclaimed power. And if you're currently in a situation where someone is systematically destroying your sense of self-worth, if you recognize yourself in the early parts of my story, please hear me. It's not you, it's them, and you deserve better. Get help. Talk to a therapist. Talk to a trusted friend or family member. Document everything. And when you're ready, walk away. Your worth is not determined by someone else's inability to see it. James thought he was ending my story when he divorced me, blamed me for our infertility, and immediately got his mistress pregnant. He thought he was proving I was defective. Instead, he gave me permission to prove what I'd always been: strong, capable, and worthy of extraordinary things. I'm about to become a mother to 4 beautiful daughters. I'm in a relationship with a man who sees my strength and celebrates it. I'm financially stable, emotionally healthy, and surrounded by people who genuinely love me. And James? James lost everything: his reputation, his career trajectory, his family's respect, his relationship, his narrative. He played a game where the only way to win was to destroy someone else. And he lost because you can't build a life on someone else's ruins without eventually falling through the cracks yourself. I didn't get revenge on James. I didn't need to. I just lived well. I just told the truth. I just refused to carry his lies anymore. And that, my friends, is the most beautiful kind of victory there is. I'm adding this part because some of you have asked for an update, and I think you deserve to know how the story really ended. My daughters are 2.5 years old now, Sophia is obsessed with books. Olivia is obsessed with music. Grace is obsessed with building things. Hope is obsessed with hugging everyone she meets. They're chaos. They're expensive. They're exhausting. They're perfect. Adrian and I got married when they were 6 months old. Small ceremony. Just family and close friends. Patricia was there. She's worked hard to repair our relationship, and while it will never be what it was, I appreciate her efforts. My daughters have a grandmother who spoils them, an aunt and uncle who babysit, a father who gets up with them at 2 a.m. when they're teething, a mother who finally understands that her worth was never about her ability to procreate. But that doesn't mean motherhood isn't one of the greatest joys of her life. James's son is 3 now. From what I understand through the grapevine, James has supervised visitation every other weekend. Christine has full custody. She's thriving. She went back to school, became a paralegal supervisor, and from what I hear, she's an amazing mother. I've never reached out to her. Our lives diverged that day at the baby shower, and that's how it should stay. But I hope she's happy. I hope her son is loved. I hope she found the same freedom I did. As for James, I genuinely don't know. I don't check his social media. I don't ask mutual acquaintances. I don't waste energy on someone who wasted so much of my time. I heard through Patricia that he moved to another state, started over. I hope he's getting therapy. I hope he's becoming a better person. But mostly, I just don't think about him anymore. Because that's the real ending to this story, not public humiliation, not some dramatic final confrontation. Just moving on. Building a life so full of love and joy and purpose that there's no room left for bitterness. James tried to write a story where I was the broken woman who couldn't give him what he wanted. But he was wrong. I was never broken. I was just waiting for him to get out of my way so I could become who I was always meant to be. And now, 3 years later, with 4 beautiful daughters sleeping in the next room and a husband who loves me exactly as I am, I can finally say, I won. Not because James lost, but because I found myself.
Thank you for following Lily's journey from devastation to triumph. If this story touched you, please share it with someone who needs to hear that their worth is not determined by someone else's inability to see it. Remember, the best revenge is living well, the best comeback is becoming yourself. And sometimes, the person who throws you away is actually doing you the biggest favor of your life.